The Silent Symphony, a story of unbreakable rhythm. Video introduction. Hook the viewer. Have you ever felt like the world is playing a song you can't hear? Like everyone else has been given a map, but you're standing at the crossroads with a blank page. You look around and see people moving in perfect rhythm, graduating, getting jobs, falling in love, finding their purpose, while you feel like you're stumbling in the dark, your steps clumsy and out of sync. You might be asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why is my path so much harder? Why do I have to fight for every single inch? If that question has ever crossed your mind, even for a second, I need you to stop scrolling. I need you to listen, because the story I'm about to tell you isn't just about overcoming obstacles. It's about a young man who was born into silence so deep, so absolute, that the world considered him broken beyond repair. They said he would never learn, never communicate, never contribute. They said his life would be a burden. But what they didn't know was that within that profound silence, he wasn't hearing emptiness. He was hearing something far more powerful. He was learning to listen to a rhythm that no one else could perceive. This is the story of Elias, a story that will change the way you see your own struggles. A story that will prove that the loudest music is often played on the quietest instruments. Stay with me. Part I. The world without sound. The world of Elias Thorne began and ended with a whisper of wind he could feel on his cheek, but never hear. Born profoundly deaf in the late 19th century, in a small, windswept fishing village on the coast of Maine, he was a puzzle no one wanted to solve. The year was 1887. There were no schools for the deaf nearby, no understanding of sign language, no compassionate specialists. There was only a village of hard, silent people who saw his silence as a curse. His father, a stern fisherman named Elias, looked at his son and saw a broken tool. The sea takes a man's hearing in its storms, he would grumble to his wife, Mary, his voice thick with disappointment. It doesn't give a boy silence from the day he is born. He is marked, Mary, marked by God for a life of struggle. Mary, a woman whose love was a fierce and silent force, would only hold Elias tighter. She saw the intelligence in his bright, blue eyes that missed nothing. He didn't hear the crash of the waves, but he felt the vibration of the floorboards when they pounded the shore. He didn't hear the seagulls crying, but he saw their shadows dance across the sand. He didn't hear his father's harsh words, but he saw the slump in his mother's shoulders, the way her smile would falter when Elias spoke. Communication was a language of touch and sight. A tap on his arm meant look. A pointed finger was a question. His mother's smile was a sunrise and his father's frown was a gathering storm. Elias became a master of observation. He could tell if a storm was coming by the way the cats in the village hid in the barns, their fur standing on end, feeling the change in pressure he couldn't hear. He knew his father was home from fishing by the heavy, rhythmic thud of his boots on the wooden porch, of vibration he felt through the soles of his own bare feet. The other children, cruel as children often are, called him dumbly. They would throw pebbles at his back when he walked by, laughing at how he flinched at the impact he couldn't hear coming. He would turn, his face a mask of confusion, which only made them laugh harder. The loneliness wasn't just in the silence, it was in the mocking glances, the turned backs, the exclusion from their games. He was a ghost in his own life, present but never truly seen. One afternoon, a traveling peddler came to the village. He set up his wares in the town square, bright fabrics, shiny pots, and most captivating of all, a small, hand-cranked music box. As the peddler turned the crank, a simple, tinkling melody filled the air. A crowd of children gathered, mesmerized. Elias, drawn by the crowd, pushed his way to the front. He saw the tiny metal cylinder spinning, the little pins plucking at the teeth of a steel comb. He didn't hear the music, but he saw the rapturous expressions on the faces of the other children. He saw a little girl swaying, her eyes closed, a smile of pure joy on her lips. He felt a pang of longing so deep it was a physical ache. What were they experiencing? What magical feeling was he being denied? He reached out a trembling hand and touched the polished wooden box. As the cylinder spun, he felt it, a faint, rhythmic buzz, a delicate shiver under his fingertips. It wasn't sound, but it was a pattern, a pulse. It was a feeling of order and beauty. It was a secret message from a world he couldn't enter. The peddler saw the look of intense concentration on the boy's face. He saw Elias's hand on the box and, realizing the boy was deaf, gently lifted Elias's other hand and placed it on his own throat. The peddler hummed the tune, a low, simple melody. Elias felt the vibration, a deep, steady thrum in the peddler's throat. His eyes widened. He looked from the peddler's throat to the music box. A connection, a bridge, was being built in his mind. Sound wasn't just an invisible thing in the air. It was a physical force. It was a vibration. From that day on, Elias's world changed. He became a collector of vibrations. He would press his cheek against the church wall on Sunday mornings, not to hear the hymns, but to feel the deep, resonant rumble of the pipe organ. He would lie on the ground and feel the distant thunder of a storm as a low, rolling tremor. He would sit on the dock, his legs dangling over the edge, and feel the pulse of the ocean against the ancient wooden pillars. The world was no longer silent. It was a symphony of vibrations, a secret language written in feeling, not sound. He was learning to read it, one tremor at a time. Part Roman 2, The Carpenter's Apprentice. When Elias turned 12, his father, in a moment of gruff pragmatism, took him to the village carpenter, an old, weathered man named Ben. "He's useless on a boat," Ben Silas said, not looking at his son. "Can't hear the creak of the mast, can't hear the shouts of the crew. He's a danger. Maybe he can be useful to you. He's strong, and he watches things." Ben, a man of few words who had lost his own son to the sea years ago, looked at Elias. He saw the fear and hope in the boy's eyes. He didn't speak. He just pointed to a pile of oak planks, then to a hand saw. He picked up a plane and ran it along a piece of wood, shaving off a paper-thin curl. He then handed the plane to Elias and gestured for him to do the same. Elias took the tool. It was heavy and awkward. His first attempts were clumsy, the plane digging in and stopping. But he watched Ben's hands, the angle of his body, the fluid motion. He tried again and again. He couldn't hear the satisfying shhhhhk of the blade, but he could feel the smooth, consistent resistance of a good cut. He could feel the difference between a rough, uneven surface and a silky one. His world of vibration expanded. Wood had a voice. Oak was hard and resistant, a stubborn, powerful hum. Pine was softer, its vibrations quicker, lighter. Ben was a silent teacher. He would demonstrate a task once, maybe twice, and then leave Elias to figure it out. He never praised with words. A simple nod of his head, a slight upward twitch of his weathered lips, was a standing ovation. For Elias, these small gestures were like a sunrise. Years passed. Elias's hands, once just tools for feeling, became instruments of creation. He learned to see the curves hidden inside a rough plank, to feel the grain of the wood and understand how it wanted to be shaped. He wasn't just a carpenter's apprentice, he was a sculptor, a craftsman who communicated with his medium through touch. One winter, a fierce storm ravaged the village, destroying the roof of the little church and damaging its most prized possession, the old pipe organ. The sound of it was gone, but its mechanism was broken, its bellows silent. A repairman was sent for from a city far away, but the cost was more than the poor congregation could afford. Elias, now a young man of 19, spent hours in the cold, silent church. He ran his hands over the organ's wooden casing, feeling every crack, every joint. He crawled inside the dusty chamber and felt the network of wind ducts, the leather of the bellows, cracked and brittle. He spent weeks studying it, not with his eyes, but with his fingertips. He felt where the air should flow, where the pressure should build. He visualized the movement of sound not as a wave in the air, but as a current of air itself, a wind that needed to be channeled. He went to Ben and, using gestures and drawings in the sawdust on the floor, explained his plan. He could fix it. He understood it. Ben looked at the complex diagrams, at the young man's intense, focused face. He saw not a deaf boy, but a master craftsman. He nodded. For 3 months Elias worked. The village watched with a mixture of skepticism and wonder. They saw him carefully carving new wooden pipes, painstakingly re-leathering the bellows with material he'd salvaged and stitched himself. They saw him assembling the intricate mechanism, his eyes closed in concentration as he felt the fit of a joint, the seal of a valve. He was building a machine from music he would never hear. Finally, the day of the rededication came. The church was full. The villagers, including his father, Silas, sat in the wooden pews, a low murmur of anticipation filling the air. Elias stood by the organ, his hands resting gently on the console. The minister said a prayer. Then he nodded to Elias. A visiting musician, a young woman from a nearby town, sat down at the keyboard. She looked at Elias, who gave her a slight nod. She placed her fingers on the keys and pressed down on a single note. A deep, resonant C note boomed through the small church. The congregation gasped. It was a sound they hadn't heard in nearly a year. It was a sound of home, of hope. But Elias didn't hear it. He felt it. He felt the floor beneath his feet vibrate. He felt the air around him pulse. He felt the immense, soul-shaking shudder of the sound he had brought back to life. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he didn't just feel a vibration, he felt the emotion it carried, the awe, the joy, the relief of every person in that room. He felt their collective sigh, a wave of feeling that was more profound than any sound wave. The musician played a simple hymn, and the church filled with music. People sang, their voices rising and falling. Elias Thorne sat in his pew, his hard face for once unguarded. He wasn't looking at the minister or the musician. He was looking at his son. Elias stood perfectly still, his hands still on the organ, his eyes closed, a single, silent tear tracing a path down his cheek. He wasn't just standing there. He was conducting the music. He was feeling every note, every chord, every vibration as it traveled through the wood of the organ, up through the floor, and into his very soul. He was hearing the silent symphony he had created. In that moment, Silas understood. His son wasn't broken. He wasn't a burden. He was a miracle. He was a man who had been given a world of silence and had, with his own 2 hands, built a cathedral of sound within it. Part Roman 3, the rhythm of the soul. Elias's reputation spread beyond the village. He became known as the carpenter who could speak to wood, who could feel the heartbeat of a machine. He didn't just build furniture and repair roofs and more. He was called upon to fix delicate music boxes, to restore antique clocks whose intricate chimes had fallen silent. People would bring him their broken treasures, objects whose voice had been lost. They would watch, fascinated, as he worked. He would hold a broken music box cylinder in his palm, turning it slowly, his eyes closed. He was feeling the tiny pins, ensuring each one was perfectly placed to pluck its note at the precise moment. He was choreographing a silent ballet. He built a beautiful rocking horse for a little girl who was ill. He carved it from a single block of pine, shaping it with a love and tenderness that seemed to flow from his hands directly into the wood. When he delivered it, the girl, who could speak, threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "Thank you. He's beautiful." Elias couldn't hear the words, but he felt the tight squeeze of her arms, the warmth of her gratitude. He felt the vibration of her small body against his. It was the most beautiful sound he had ever felt. His father, in the final years of his life, finally learned to communicate with his son. It was a clumsy, silent language of gestures and shared looks, but it was a language of love. Before Silas died, he took Elias's rough, calloused hand in his own. He placed it on his chest, over his heart. He then placed his own hand on Elias's chest. He looked into his son's eyes, and for the first time, there was no disappointment, no gruffness. There was only pride. He squeezed Elias's hand once, a firm, final pulse, a vibration of love. Elias felt his father's heartbeat slow and then stop. It was the last conversation they ever had, a perfect, silent understanding. Elias lived a long and full life. He never heard a bird sing, never heard the laughter of a child, never heard the words "I love you." But he felt them all. He felt the joy in the frantic beat of a dog's tail, the comfort in the steady purr of a cat on his lap, the profound connection in the handshake of a friend. He taught the village children to feel the world. He would take them to the dock and have them lie down to feel the pulse of the sea. He would have them press their ears against the great oak trees in the forest to hear the silent rush of sap. He taught them that listening wasn't just something you did with your ears, it was something you did with your whole being. On the day he died, an old, weathered man with kind eyes and gentle hands, a soft breeze blew through the open window of his small cottage. It rustled the pages of a book on his table and gently lifted the white hairs on his head. He didn't hear it, but he felt its cool caress on his skin. He felt the faint vibration of the house settling around him, a familiar, comforting hum. And as he closed his eyes for the last time, he felt the greatest vibration of all, the slow, steady, powerful pulse of his own heart, beating out a rhythm that was uniquely, beautifully, and unbreakably his. He had lived in a world of silence, but he had left behind a symphony. Conclusion: the call to action. The spotlight returns to the speaker. Elias's story isn't just a tale from a bygone era. It's a mirror held up to our own lives. How often do we let the noise of the world drown out our own inner rhythm? How often do we define our capabilities by the limitations others project onto us? Elias was told he was useless because he couldn't hear. But by learning to feel, he discovered a connection to the world that most of us, with our ears full of chatter and distraction, will never know. His silence wasn't an emptiness, it was a canvas. His struggle wasn't a punishment, it was a teacher. What is the silence in your life? What is the obstacle, the hardship, the seeming disadvantage that the world tells you is a weakness? Is it a lack of money, a lack of education, a difficult childhood, a physical challenge, a fear of failure? Whatever it is, I want you to look at it differently now. That silence isn't an absence of music. It's an invitation to listen on a deeper level. It's a challenge to build your own instrument, to compose your own symphony with materials that no one else can see. The world will always try to define you by what you lack. Don't let it. Define yourself by the vibrations you create. Define yourself by the love you feel, the work you pour your soul into, the kindness you offer, the resilience you show. The most beautiful music isn't always heard, it's felt. It's the silent symphony of a life lived with purpose, passion, and an unbreakable rhythm. If Elias's story has touched you today, if it has sparked a fire in your heart or shifted your perspective even a little, then I have one request. Don't keep this feeling to yourself. Hit that like button. Let that thumbs up be a vibration, a signal to the algorithm and to me that this story mattered to you. It tells me to create more stories like this, to dig deeper for the narratives that can light a fire in the dark. Share this video, send it to a friend who is struggling, to a family member who has forgotten their own strength, to anyone who needs to be reminded that their silence is not their sentence. You never know who is waiting to hear this message. You might be the vibration that wakes someone up to their own potential. And if you want to continue feeling these stories, if you want to join a community of people who are learning to listen to the world on a deeper level, then subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Together, we can learn to hear the silent symphonies all around us. Thank you for listening. Now, go out there and create your own music.